Daf Amud Beis, the Mishnah right on top. Lo yeshiv anu l'fnei asaper samach lemincha ad sheyispal. So now this Mishnah is going to be discussing things that are not really directly related to Shabbos. They're things that should not be done in the afternoon. Samach lemincha, close to the time of mincha. We'll see details in the Mishnah of the Gemara, what it means exactly. But things that activities should not be done. We're afraid that he might now not daven mincha, he might miss his mana mincha, and therefore there are certain things that he shouldn't do samach lemincha. Rashi explains that this is brought down here because further we will see that there are things that should not be done on Erev Shabbos, samach l'Shabbos. So it's in that similar type of context of things that should not be done close to the time, and therefore it's brought down here at this point in Masechet Shabbos. So the Mishnah says that a person lo yeshiv anu l'fnei asaper should not sit before the barber samach lemincha, a half hour before the time of mincha. Shows money, should not sit before the time of mincha ad sheyispal, until he davens. He has to daven first. Lo yikonas adam lemerchas, and similarly he should not go into the merchas, the bathhouse, v'lo leburski, not to the tannery where they used to have the skins, where they used to tan them for leather. V'loy lechol, and not for a suda, v'loy ladin, and not for a din Torah. V'mischilu ein mafsik. But if they started, even though they started, Taisus explains, even though they started bi'isur, even though they shouldn't have started, but even if they did start bi'isur, ein mafsikin, they don't have to stop, provided, Taisus says, provided that there is still time to daven mincha, that they'll have time when they finish. But if they won't have time, then they have to stop. They should not start this somewhat at the time of mincha. They should, now when the time of mincha comes, they should daven mincha and then do these activities. If they started, even if they started when they shouldn't have, they don't have to stop, provided there's enough time, when they'll be finished, there's enough time to daven mincha. Mafsikin l'krishma, v'in mafsikin l'tfila. But that's only l'tfila, which is the rabbanan. But for krishma, they have to be mafsik. Meaning, for Krishma, they have to be mafsik, even if there is time to recite Krishma after they're finished. Nevertheless, they still have to be mafsik, because Krishma is a deraisa. Let's see the Gemara. Hi, samach lemincha. It says samach lemincha. Which mincha are we talking about? There are two minchas. There's a mincha gedola and a mincha ketana. There's a mincha gedola, which is a half hour after chatzois, which is the earliest time one can daven mincha. That's mincha gedola, where mincha gedola, the tomid shel bein arbaim, mincha is corresponding the korban tomid shel bein arbaim. That's the earliest time that they could shech the tomid shel bein arbaim, but that's not when it was usually brought. The tomid shel bein arbaim was brought 3.5 hours after that. That's when it was the hakrava for the Talmud Shel Bein Harabayim. So the earliest time is Mincha Gedola. The preferred time, according to most poskim, the preferred time, the common time, the prevalent time for the Talmud Shel Bein Harabayim was Mincha Ketana. So when we say that you cannot do these like samach lemincha, we're talking about even before the Mincha Gedola, where there's a large period of time in a day which has 12 hours, so there's the 5.5 samach lemincha means from chatzois, so there's 6 hours to the end of the day. There's much time. There's from the time of mincha gedola, there's 5.5 hours to daven mincha. It's a large period of time. Or does it mean no? It's only mincha ketana, where it's only mincha. There's only 2.5 hours to the end of the day. What are we referring to over here? So hi samach lemincha lemincha gedola my loy. Why can he not do these activities? Ha'ika shus b'yem tova. There's still a long period of time till the end of the day. There's a lot of time to still daven mincha. Why would we answer it so early? Eli, perhaps you'll say samach lemincha ketana. It means samach lemincha ketana, where there's not that much time left of the day. Im hischil, the Mishnah says im hischil ein mafsikin. It says if they started, they don't have to stop. So if that's the case, name it to have it to Yufta Rishu ben Levi. Well, let's say that should be a kasha Rishu ben Levi, Domer Rishu ben Levi. When the time of Tfilas HaMincha comes, also L'Adam Sheyitim Klum Koshem Yispal Tfilas Mincha. He says when it comes the time of the Mincha, then he can't eat anything, he can't even taste anything until he davens Mincha. He has to daven Mincha first. So now our Mishnah says that if you started, you don't have to stop. Now, if we're talking Samach L'Mincha Ketana, then it says if he started, he doesn't have to stop. Let's say that is not Dirshu ben Levi, who says that you can't taste anything. Well, obviously, then he would have to stop. So how do we reconcile this? The Gemara says, really, I'll tell you what the Mishnah is referring to is Samach L'Mincha, even Mincha Gedoyla. You cannot engage in any of these activities. He has so much time left to the day. Why is it a concern? And what are we talking about? The Gemara answers, B'tispores. We say we can't take the haircut. It doesn't mean a regular haircut. It means a B'taras ben aloshin. It means a very elaborate haircut. It means an haircut, which is a special type of haircut, which the tip of one hair was by the root of the other hair. It took a long, long time. So it was a very elaborate haircut. And that's why we're coming. But in a regular haircut, in a chanami, Samach L'Mincha Gedoyla would not be a problem. And merachas, it doesn't mean just taking a bath, just taking a shower. It means kula milsa, means hot water, cold water, and the steam bath. So it's a long period of time. And not for the tanner. Laburski Gedoyla, where there's many, many skins over there that have to be tanned. It takes a long time. And not to eat. Besuda Gedoyla. It means a large feast like a chasana. It means the beginning of the din Torah. So a din Torah might last for a long time, and this is the beginning of a din Torah. So that's one approach the Gemara has to the Mishnah. We're talking Mincha Gedoyla, but we're talking about very elaborate actions and very elaborate procedures, and therefore we answer it even Samach L'Mincha Gedoyla. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Omri has a different approach. He says Lo Ilam, but as far as Didan, it means even a regular haircut. So what's the problem? There's so much time left of the day. So why do we say you should not sit there? Because we're afraid, in a chanami, if everything goes smoothly, then there shouldn't be a problem. But we're afraid that the scissors might break, and therefore you might get stuck and it might take a long period of time. It just means, doesn't mean kula milsa, it means even the merachas, even lazia, even just for a steam without hot and cold water. He might faint or become faint. It doesn't necessarily mean that burski adola means luna ba'alma, even just to examine and to look into his affairs. So you might see that he's going to have some loss of something if he doesn't rectify it, if he doesn't deal with it right away, and then it might get carried away. Even a suda katana. There's so much time. What's the problem? Because we're afraid, he starts off with the suda katana, but who knows where it ends up, and it might lead into a large suda. He might get carried away and miss the time of mincha. Even b'gemardin. It means even b'gemardin. Because even though it's the end of the din, but they might see now, another svara, another tzad, another schuz, and they might now negate their whole approach, and they might start all over again, and they might drag and take a long period of time. So therefore, even though it appears that this is not going to take a long period of time, but it might end up that way, and therefore they answered it even samach l'mincha gedolim. So that's a different approach to the Mishnah. Halacha is brought down. It's different machlekes rishonim how we paskin, and somehow we don't paskin like neither of these, because these are just totally unreconciled. The Mishnah of Shu ben Levi, and some places when we do not paskin that way, and therefore those who are mekil in many of these things. So ayin halacha in the paiskim. So we say you shouldn't start the haircut that you should not have before you daven. When is it considered the beginning of the haircut? When he puts the sheet of the barber, when he puts it on his knees, he covers himself with the cloth with the sheet of the barber, that's the beginning of the haircut. One is considered the beginning of the bathhouse, where he takes off his hat. That's considered the beginning. He's starting the merchas. When is he starting to engage in the tanning? He rolls up, takes his hands out of his sleeves, and he ties his sleeves in back of him, so his hands are free now to work. That's the beginning of the Borsky. What's considered the beginning of eating the meal? Rav Amar Mishiyat Yoda. When he washes. Rav Chanin Amar Mishiyat Chagar. When he unties his belt. It's not a machlekes, it's a difference in the custom in Bavel and Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, they didn't tie their belt so tightly, so they didn't have to loosen their belt before the Suda. The Suda starts when they wash, but in Bavel, they tied it very tightly. So to eat the meal, they had to untie their belt or loosen their belts. So in Bavel, the beginning of the meal is considered when they are now loosening their belt. That's the first thing they did, even before they washed. That's the beginning of the Suda. Amar Abaya Hane Chavim Bavloi, he says, our Chaverim from Bavel, Leman Damar Tzilas Arvis Rishus. According to the Man Damar, it says Tzilas Arvis is Rishus. That Tzilas Arvis is Keneged, the Haktoras, Evarim, Updorim, which is not Makiv, the Kapara, Rashi says, and therefore it's a Rishus. And Tosfos explains what it means Rishus. It doesn't mean that it's voluntary. It means it's not on the same level of chiyuv as Shachos and Mincha. It means is that if there's a mitzvah, that the mitzvah might take precedence over the arvis. So the command was that Tzilas Arvis Rishus, we're more mekel on it. It's not, doesn't have the same chumrah as Mincha. Kevin the shor lehamayna lamatrachin lei. Once already he loosens his belt, then we're not matriach him to now stop his meal. Well, the mandam chayva, but the mandam who says it's a chayva, then matriachin alei. Since it's a chayva, then we would be matriach him, and we would say he has to stop. He has to stop his meal. So if you say that Tzilas Arvis Rishus, we say we're more mekel, and we say once he unties his belt, we're not matriach him. He doesn't have to stop his meal. Tosfos is bothered. How can you say he doesn't have to stop his meal? That means he's eating. How can he eat if it's already time for Arvis? It's time for Krishma. He can't eat before he recites Krishma, before he learns Krishma. So how can you say that Lamanu Tzilas Arvis Rishus, that we're not matriach him? Even if Tzilas Arvis is a Rishus, but Krishma is a Deraisa. How can you not be mechayiv him to stop and recite Krishma? We're talking, we already said Krishma. He already, when learned Krishma, he was Yaitza, the mitzvah Deraisa Krishma. Now it's only a question of Arvis. Laman Damras Rishus, we're not matriach him. Correct the Gemara, why do you say that if it's a chayva that we are matriach and we say he has to stop? Mincha, everyone holds that mincha is a chayva, and yet we learned in our Mishnah, and yet our Mishnah says if he did start, he shouldn't start, but if he did, ein mafsikin, you don't have to stop. When is it considered the beginning of the meal? The beginning of the meal is when you untie your belt, and it says, nevertheless, if he already untied his belt, even though Tzilas Mincha is a chayva, he does not have to stop. So even if Tzilas Arvis is a chayva, why does he have to stop? More answers. There's a difference, because by Mincha we're not afraid that he'll drink, he'll become intoxicated. We're not afraid that he will miss the Zman. But by Arvis, it's the evening time already. It's Shichros. We're afraid that if he does not stop, he might continue with the meal. There'll be Shichros, and then he'll miss it. Inami, the Gemara says, B'mincha came to Kvile Zimna Mirsas V'loy. By Mincha, it's a very limited time. He has a very limited opportunity to do it. So we're not so afraid. He'll be more vigilant and more diligent, and we're not afraid he'll miss the time. But by Arvis, he has a whole night. He has much more time, and therefore he might be lax, and therefore he might be Pesheya. We say he has to stop. Arvis came in the Kula Lailas man Arvis loy Mirsus, he's not that afraid. Vasilamish Maskif Lorov Sheshes. What do you mean over here? We're not matriach. According to what we say that Tfilas Arvis is Rishus, we're not matriach. Once he unfastened his belt, he loosened his belt. Triachusil Meser Amnai. Is that such a tircha? It's such a big tircha that we say that if he already loosened his belt, we're not matriach him now to tie his belt and daven and then loosen it again. And why does he have to now tie his belt and not tie? Okay, so now he realizes he should get up and daven. Why does he have to tie and untie his belt? Just go ahead and daven. More answers Mishum Shenemer Hikan Likras Alekecha Yisrael. You can't daven without being prepared properly and in a dignified way. So he's come to daven, he can't daven with a belt that's loosened, he has to tighten his belt and daven. So the Machlekes Rishonim how to learn that. According to some Rishonim, this is only answering the second question. The second question is there such a tircha about the belt? The second question rather is that can he not daven with the belt untied? Does he have to tighten his belt to daven? On that, the Gemara answers and says, no, he cannot daven with his belt not fastened properly, because he can cross Alekecha Yisrael. He has to prepare himself properly before the Rebbeinu Shalom, so he can't with a loosened belt daven in that manner. So some Rishonim learn it's only an answer on the second question, that why can't he daven in this manner that he is now with a loosened belt? But it doesn't answer the first question. That to say is it such a tircha to loosen and tie the belt and loosen it again. So other Rishonim learn it answers both questions. Since it's Hikah in the Cross Alekecha Yisrael, he has to prepare himself when he davens. He has to be in a prepared state. He has to fasten his belt and prepare himself. If we now obligate him to stop the meal, it's not simply a matter of quickly tightening his belt and daven. He has to prepare himself. That would be considered a tircha, and therefore we don't obligate him, according to Mandam or Tfilas Arvis or Rishus, we do not obligate him now to stop and daven.